Welcome to Childcare Conversations, the podcast where early childhood leaders like you get real-world strategies, honest talk, and a whole lot of support. Whether you're running one center or many, we're here to help you lead with confidence and clarity. This episode is brought to you by this quarter's sponsor, Playground, the all-in-one childcare management software. We're all about managing monkeys and saving you time at your center. With this platform, you can. We're proud to partner with a team that's as committed to your success as we are. Learn more at tryplayground.com. Now, let's get into today's conversation, one we think you're really going to love.
Welcome back to this childcare conversation. And today we're having a conversation with Susie Beghin, and she wants to talk to you about making sure that the kids are getting some science, some technology, some engineering, some art, and maybe a little bit of math.
Boy, that's a lot of letters. That's like, all kinds of stuff right there. And what's going to be great is that Susie's going to tell you as an owner how you can pull this, probably how you're already doing it. And what I love is it's also a way that you can start to go, hey, notice me, I'm doing something a little different. So with that, Susie, tell us a little bit about how you got started in early childcare, and we'll just kind of go from there.
Sure. Similar to your story, actually, I got started because I had a child. So, yeah, that's how I got into it. I was in a whole other different field before I got into early learning. But then once my child came along, I really got interested in kids. And I always knew I was good with kids. I just didn't know that I was so passionate about it until I got into it. And then, it just kind of snowballed from there. I opened a daycare and then a second one and then a third one. And then, filled them all up, and we have waiting lists for all of them. So I created my own program, my own curriculum called 4 Pillars of Learning, which incorporates STEAM, those 5 wonderful letters. And I think that's really what differentiated us in terms of what we offer compared to the other daycares out there.
Well, why don't we start with where are you located?
Sure. So I'm in the Greater Toronto area in Canada. And those are where my 3 areas, my 3 daycares are located.
Awesome. All right. I was like,
So you keep yours close by each other. I know some people are like, no, I only want one that I can physically visit, and the rest I want to have to, like Zoom.
Yeah. Well, actually, they're like 10 minutes apart from each other. So it's great because I can go in between them really quickly.
Love that. Love that. And so, how did you find yourself in, what was it about STEAM that made you go, oh, I want that. Like, that is where my interests lie as an educational focus when it came to creating your programs.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe it's part of my personality too. I'm sort of a logical kind of person, right? So I always gravitated to like science and math. And so, I was in technology in my previous career because I was, I did IT consulting. And so I think that was just kind of a little bit about who I was. And so I wanted to bring that into the early years because I noticed that we didn't have a huge focus on things like technology, science, and math, even engineering, right? And then, of course, we bring in the arts because, you can't do any of those things without creativity. So I think that's how it all got started for me, is that it was my own background that I brought into the field. And I thought, why can't we be teaching these things at the earliest ages, like starting at infants?
Well, and some of those things were super prevalent and then became less so. Like, it's an ebb and flow. Because when I was a child in early childhood education, I had access to saws and hand drills and hammers and all kinds of engineering and, simple machines. And I don't see a woodworking corner in very many centers anymore. We've gotten a bit scared of doing that kind of stuff. And I think we need to take some pages out of the Danish approach to early learning, where they're like, no, kids need to take risks. Kids need to build huge structures to work at that engineering and the science of building a structure that is bigger than you, whether you're building it out of cardboard or you're building it out of unit blocks or, whatever building tool, that kind of thing scares some teachers and scares some parents, but it's so valuable for the children to build something out of a monumental size, right? They get such a kick out of it.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you call it engineering because a lot of people are doing engineering but not realizing it. They call it block play, right? They have usually a block
Yep.
center in their classroom somewhere, and they don't know that it's engineering skills that they're building. But when you use that bigger word, instead of calling it block play and you call it engineering, parents see it differently. They see that there's high level thinking going on here. It's not just stacking one block on top of another, which is important, but it's more than that. Like there's issues of stability and balance. And, so many things happen when you're building. And like I said, classrooms are already doing this, even, starting at infants. They're putting one block on top of another. That's engineering. And sometimes we just have to change our terminology, right? And really see it as higher level thinking and understand what's really going on beyond that block play, right? So I'm glad that you called it
Yeah.
engineering. That's
Well,
amazing.
I mean, unit blocks were designed for children by an architect. Like Froebel was an architect, and the works he created for the infant room, for the infants, and for I can't remember what he called toddlers. He had a weird name for them that wasn't toddlers, but he had like different stages of works, and the preschool and elementary age, he was like, you guys need unit blocks. We need arches. We need, all of that stuff, because he was an architect and he knew that children needed to understand the basics of engineering in order to know what was safe and what wasn't safe, because kids were going to build stuff anyway. Let's give them some tools to learn that stuff at a kind of not quite instinctive level, but if you've built with those arches enough times in the block center, you eventually figure out, I have to have both of them for it to stand up. I
Yeah.
can't just have one.
Well, I think one of the things that is exciting and hopefully folks who are listening will go, oh, I want to know more, is that, understanding the vocabulary, understanding the nomenclature does so much when increasing your professionalism and the professionalism of your curriculum and of your educators in your program. So if you are listening and you're going, okay, well, I don't come from that background, you know, blocks are blocks to me, whatever, that kind of thing, do your own research. You can use, curriculum. I am absolutely sure that in the show notes, Susie will have some resources for us that we'll be able to share with you. But when I started in out of school time or school age care a really, really long time ago, one of the things that I made um, a huge deal out of when working with educators was making sure that they had the engineering nomenclature and that they understood, you know, everything that was happening. Even if you're using, if STEAM is maybe you're more of the A than the E, or maybe you're more in the science, using the actual nomenclature, even when it's little things like a little bit of a making a volcano that explodes and you're using vinegar and baking soda, using the actual nomenclature, using the scientific names. My favorite was giving kids actual beakers and letting them actually pour vinegar and baking soda using the actual science lab equipment, regardless of their age. Like they didn't need to be afraid of this stuff. So, I love that we are taking that vocabulary component and that perspective because, like you said, we're already doing it. Let's call a spade, right? So let's make sure that we can elevate the educator in the room so that the educator knows that nomenclature. What are you calling? Whether it's arches, whether it's, principles like, engineering, as far, like you said before, building those foundations, and some of that. So what are some of your favorite resources that owners can share with their educators? What might be some tips? Or I know Carrie's got her favorite educators.
Mentors. How about
Thank you. I'm like going,
educational
I'm looking for a
mentors?
word and I'm not coming up with it.
In terms of resources, I would say, I think that STEAM learning really is an integrated approach to learning, right? So it's not just science by itself. It's not just math by itself or engineering by itself. It's everything together. So once you really understand that concept of STEAM being like an architect, you mentioned the architect profession, right? Like when you're an architect, you're not just doing engineering, you're doing engineering and design at the same time. So you're incorporating art and engineering concepts. You're also doing science and math and technology when you're using the tools to create your designs. So it's really an integrated approach where everything comes together, and you're not separating it in silos and saying, I'm doing science right now, I'm doing math right now. Math is incorporated into everything that you do. I always say when we teach math, we don't want to make it a math lesson. Math is part of us singing songs, right? Math is part of me in the dramatic area, with a cash register. So when you look at STEAM as kind of like that integrated approach where you're doing multiple subjects at the same time, it's kind of like that architect. They don't break down, okay, I'm going to do the science component right now. No, they do it all in one. And same with play. When children are playing, they're not saying, I'm doing science or math right now. They're just playing. And they're doing all those things simultaneously. And when you do activities and when you have your curriculum and your program, you can structure it that way that, you're getting multiple learning. And this is the benefit to parents is that when you teach them what you're doing, because you're going to talk about it, and you're going to show them what you do, they'll be amazed. They'll really be amazed at what you're doing and how you're doing it. And just by, like you said, the vocabulary, changing how you describe what you're doing and seeing all those components together, really will elevate your program. And as far as resources, back to the original question, um,
It's okay. Sometimes I forget what I asked and why I asked it. So thank you for going, this has been great. Oh yeah, I forgot I asked that question.
I'm gonna give myself a plug there for resources. I do lots of training on this. I teach about how to teach STEAM and incorporate it into your own philosophy of learning and your own curriculum. So you don't have to go out and buy any new curriculum. You can incorporate it into whatever you're already doing. And like I said, you're probably already doing it. You're just figuring out, how do I tell people about it? And how do I make it a little bit more intentional maybe? And so
Oh,
there's
well,
there's my book
that's
as well, of
awesome.
course, is another resource where I talk all about it. So,
I'm glad you
Well,
eventually
okay.
got there because I was like, no, she's got a secret. She does. I know she does. I saw it. So, no,
Well, and
same with
I want her to talk about the 4 pillars of her curriculum also. I
oh,
want to
sure.
make
okay.
sure we talk about that also.
So when I created my curriculum, I was looking at a lot of different models out there, and there was not one that specifically sat with me really well. So I was like, I got to create my own. And so I took a little bit from everywhere, right? Like I took a little bit of Montessori, I took a little bit of Reggio. Well, I took a lot of Reggio because I really liked that. And I took a little bit of, a little bit of from everywhere. And I said, okay, I want to create something that parents will resonate with and that they can understand, and that I can explain to them. So I thought of these 4 pillars, and these 4 pillars kind of hold up the foundation, right? And so the first pillar is language and literacy, because you can't do anything if you don't have language and literacy, right? You have to learn that before you can learn anything else. You have to be able to communicate before you can learn any other subject, right? So language and literacy to me was first pillar. Second pillar was the STEAM skills, because STEAM, which incorporates that science, technology, engineering, art, and math, that really is the digital age learning, right? Like this is what our kids today will need tomorrow to do their jobs. They need their creativity. They need innovative thinking. They need critical thinking. They get all that with STEAM. Then the third pillar is physical activity and nutrition, because I know that healthy body, healthy mind, right? So you have
Yep.
to, work on your body through physical activity and nutrition to be able to learn, right? Just puts you in a good frame of mind for learning. And then the fourth one is what I call mindful awareness, but it's basically social emotional skills, learning how to regulate, right? So if you take all of that, all those four pillars, you really have a holistic approach to learning that incorporates every part of that child. So that was what my four pillars is all about.
I mean, it sounds to me like you got all the big elements, and you didn't do it by setting up a math center and setting up a writing center. You just did it by incorporating all of the activities throughout the day. I feel so sad for those math centers. They're so lonely. Nobody ever goes over to the math center.
Yes.
But if you
But
give kids access to a ruler, they will measure all kinds of
Oh,
things.
for sure. Like measuring tapes and rulers in the engineering area or block area, whatever you call it, definitely is a must, because they're going to measure their structures. Like they love the measuring tape. It's one of the most favorite things in the classroom. And it's math.
so
Absolutely.
how do we have these conversations with those who want to gonna go with the ones who decide that we have to have this specific thing to be a quality program? Because I think that one of the things that happens as owners, and at least we see it a lot in Texas in the US, and I won't say it doesn't happen in other places across the country or even across other countries,
Yeah.
but we get people who are regulatory, or these people who are trying to tell you this is what what your location should look like. Because I think that you brought up some good points, and I know Carrie did when she said those math centers, right? And even like I see people pull out and they're like, we're going to do art time at this time. And I'm like, but what if I don't want to do art right then? What if I want to do art differently? What if I want to do my art with my science, right? How do we, as early educators who are passionate, who have thoughts, how do we help educate those who are regulating that not all of
Those
us are
who
going to fit in this nice little box, and that sometimes even they have to think outside of the box a little?
Yeah. We're kind of lucky here where I am, which is in
Mhm.
Ontario. We have something called How Does Learning Happen? And so the government has come up with a document that says, how does learning happen? Like it's a question, right? And the answer to the question is it happens through belonging, engagement, expression, and well-being. And if you look at that and you look at my four pillars, you'll see similarities in that learning happens through educator involvement, right? And through real life experiences, hands-on experiences that children have um, through play, right? It's simple. And so you
Yep.
don't need all of those little regulations that say you need to have this in this area or this in that area. Like real learning happens that way. And maybe there needs to be some influence at a higher level to really, let's use the current research and say, how does learning happen? That's how they came up with the document. Is they went to psychologists, psychiatrists, educational consultants, experts, and all of that. And then they came up with this. It's just all about interactions and through play. That's what learning is. And so as long as you're doing that in your center, it doesn't really matter what else is there. I mean, you have materials and stuff, but it's about that.
So Carrie, you and I both know that we've seen, and I'm good, in where we are, those Montessori programs are the ones who get dinged the most because they don't fit the plastic curriculum bubble that the check markers and the checklist folks are looking for. And so we have to sometimes work with those owners and those directors and managers and head of schools to help them educate the people with the list, right? And so, Carrie, what would you say to somebody who's listening, who's like, well, we do all of those, and I agree with Susie, but I feel like I'm stuck because I have to have that lonely math center as a lonely math center. What might you say
So
do give resource for those folks?
I do things in ways that both serve the kids and make the person with the checklist happy. So instead of giving a table and calling it the math center, I label the basket math center that I've put in the building section of the classroom. And then on the picture, there is the measuring tape, there is the ruler, and there is the measuring tape that you use for sewing. So those three things
Yes.
are all in there,
Yeah.
and a calculator, because they do love a calculator even if they don't
Yes.
know what they're doing with it.
Uh-huh.
And by putting those things in there and labeling it math center and putting it where children are naturally going to need those materials, then I have made the children happy and it's been helpful to their actual exploration and learning. And I've made the person with the checklist happy because it's labeled what they need to check off.
I love that.
And
That
yeah,
is
I mean,
amazing. I would do that
Well,
in
that's
all
figure out what
centers.
works.
Wouldn't that be wonderful
Yeah.
if you had a basket that said art materials in your engineering area, or you had a basket that said science materials, right? And you could just say, all those things that are requirements, have them as baskets, in each
Yeah.
of the areas so that you can cross mix them, because that's where the real learning happens, is when they mix.
Well, what I love is when you have really awesome space design. And so you're using your environmental design and you have things like block. Anyway, that
Building.
section of you have building and you have it next to what might be considered the dramatic play area, because some of my favorite activities in again, it comes back to how we've educated our educators, and do they understand what's happening? Do they understand the language? And that they go, okay, so this morning, I want you to imagine you're here, right? So maybe you're going to go shopping this morning. Maybe you're going to do cooking this morning. And, if they can do those things and pull in everything from the entire room, why do we have to say that only the 3 of you get to do this in this space? Why can't I have 12 kids who have decided they're going to start a restaurant and they're going to build the restaurant and they're going to design their menu and they're going to cook their food and they're going to make their food because they've got the art supplies and they've got the science materials and they've got some hats they can put on, that they're going to feel like they're now a chef or whatever that role might be. We've seen some great spaces that do that, but then I also see people do things like, I've got a building center and right next to it, I'm going to put the quiet space with the books. Like, that don't make no sense. That's gonna, like, somebody's gonna start building with those books. They're gonna become little teepees for the little, blocks to go play
Yeah.
in.
I mean,
Yes.
if I were in charge of a preschool classroom, every preschool classroom, about 50% of the preschool classroom would be building supplies, building materials, and art, because your collection of old toilet paper rolls and old paper towel rolls can go in either one.
Yes.
Right. And having pictures and blueprints, line drawings of the Taj Mahal, that's an art piece, right? So people can try to paint it, or it's inspiration for the block center. And then we have clipboards with pencils attached. Just
And you've got literacy
glue
there.
the
You got,
pencils onto a
it's
piece of
amazing.
yarn.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't understand why this is what we did back in the 80s, guys. You take the pencil, you put a piece of yarn on it, and then you glue it, and then you tie the other end to the clipboard. Then you're never losing your pencils. This is old school and very helpful.
And that's how you can put literacy everywhere, right? I mean, you have
Yeah.
the written part where they can pretend to make drop marks or whatever stage they're at in their literacy, printed, but then also reading, right? Like, you have books related to that. So let's
Yep.
say I have an architectural magazine book there in the area, so I can read or pretend to read or look at pictures of buildings. In that area, or like you said, the menu in the dramatic area where you can write
Or
something, write the
and
order.
you can put
So amazing.
hard hats. Have some hard hats on the wall. Have some, blueprints. I mean, you don't have, I mean,
Flashlights. And again, we put
Oh,
that in the basket and we call it the science center. And you put the cellophane and the rubber bands so that they can change the color. You can
so many creative
make,
ideas.
yeah,
I think we could probably have this discussion all day, but I am excited. Hopefully, this conversation will get those of you who are listening to go, oh, I never thought about how my room arrangement should match my educational philosophy. And what's really great is that as you learn the vocabulary, as you change the nomenclature, when you're using it to describe your program, when you're sharing with the parents, you get to differentiate your program from the other programs in the community. And you didn't do anything different other than maybe you got some baskets, and instead of having one place for blocks, you now have blocks in 3 or 4 places, or you have art and science in 3 or 4 places. And I absolutely love that. Susie, thank you so much for coming and having a conversation with us. All of Susie's resources will be in our show notes, links to her website. Go find resources. If you've got questions, if you go to, do they have to go to Buzzsprout to get to the text us? If you
no,
go,
they just, it's in the show notes. You just hit text the show.
all right. So if you go into the show notes and you have questions for Susie, hit the, text to the show and make sure you tell us that your question is for Susie. And it's even better if you also give us a way to contact you, because otherwise it ends up just on an episode. And so we hope that you're listening. So Carrie,
And
what else do they need to do?
well, they need to join all the people from Edmonton who are listening to the show and share it with other people. And if you haven't already subscribed or followed the show on your podcast player, do that today. And we will see you in a few days.
Thanks for tuning in. We love bringing you real talk and fresh insight from the world of early childhood education. Be sure to follow us on social media to stay connected and catch all of the latest episodes. And if you're planning a conference, training, or special event, Kate and Carrie would love to speak to your audience. You can learn more about their keynote sessions and workshops at kateandcarrie.com. If you learned something today, share the show and leave us a review below. We'll see you next time on Child Care Conversations.